Everyday leadership requires a lot of energy, so we must invest in our well-being to show up consistently. Welcome to Tradies Who Lead, the podcast about everyday leadership for everyday legends. I'm Ashley Valtecchi, a diesel mechanic by trade and your host. I'm thrilled to introduce Bardie, a carpenter turned site manager, keynote speaker, and a passionate advocate for mental health within the trades and especially the construction sector. Bardie has witnessed firsthand the challenges tradies face on the job site, which contribute to mental health pressures and the alarming suicide rates in Australia's construction industry. Her experiences have fueled a strong mission to transform the sector by raising mental health awareness and empowering tradies to live authentic, purposeful lives, prioritising their well-being. To do this, Bardie founded The Shift, a platform equipping tradies with invaluable tools for overall well-being through breathwork and self-care education. Through The Shift, she fosters connection and hope, empowering tradies to thrive mentally, emotionally, and professionally. Thanks for joining me on the podcast today, Bards.
I'm so happy to be here. Genuinely, I've been really excited for this, especially feel like we've had lots of cool chats leading up to this.
It's really about picking your brain about leadership and what that means to you. So what is leadership to you?
I feel like I've got a bit of a different idea of leadership, but I feel like true leadership can only come from that place of authenticity inside of us. And there's kind of that idea that's floating around constantly that some people are born leaders and some people aren't. And I really believe to my core that every single person born into this world is a leader. And it's when we realize that we're able to really step up and lead our own lives. Leadership to me starts from the moment we wake up till the moment we go to bed.
That's really powerful. And this might be a bit of a curveball of a question, but I feel like authenticity can be a really hard thing to grasp because it's just kind of like, well, what does that mean? And because it's different for every person, it's really hard to define. How would you explain authenticity to someone who's kind of not sure what it means or how they can be authentic?
I think that's a really interesting question. And I think for some of us, it can be really hard to recognize because in this world, we have so many ways that we feel like we have to show up. There's so many different masks and hats that we wear at work, in our relationships, when we are out just by ourselves, when we have time with maybe people we're not as comfortable with, and then who we are when we really are by ourselves and safe. And to me, authenticity is who you are at your core. So when you strip all those masks back, when you are able to hear that voice inside you that says yes or no and go further towards that, that's what I believe authenticity is. It's when we're able to strip away the shame of our story and just really embrace who we are.
Oh, I'm so glad I just threw that question at you because wow, I don't think I could have defined it that well. That's really powerful. And it is very much about that knowing ourselves. And that can be a journey in and of itself. When it comes to your leadership journey, where did that start? Like, when did you start calling yourself a leader or I guess embody this idea that you were the leader of your own life?
Wow, that's really interesting because I do feel like I've always been quite a driven and headstrong person, but in my life, I've also really struggled with being a people pleaser. So if anyone struggles with that, they will understand how hard it can be to really step into authenticity and lead your life if you are trying to make everyone around you happy. Because when we're trying to make everyone around us happy, we naturally have to cut off that voice and cut off the direction that we're pulled to go in. And I feel like leadership for me has been continual growth and continual learning. I wouldn't say there's been one moment. And it's kind of funny. I feel like it slowly happened over time, but I feel like there was a moment in my life when I went on The Bridge. So I was on a reality TV show, and in that show, I was selected by the group to be the leader. and there was so much fear that came up in me, and I didn't believe I could do it. And being put in that position and forced to lead and have a team believe in me when I couldn't believe in myself, I had no option but to lead. And through doing that, I actually realized, oh, wow, I'm actually a pretty good leader. And that was a really defining moment. I think it's can be really helpful to our experience when we get that external kind of validation to like give the nod of, yep, you're going in the right direction. But otherwise, it's been a real continual realization of myself as a leader. And I feel like just becoming so strong in the way I lead my life and watching the fruits of that come.
I'm going to ask this next question mostly for my own curiosity. I guess when we think of reality TV, it's not something that I would associate with authenticity. And that's not necessarily a reflection of the people on the show, but also because, you know, even reality TV, it gets edited and manipulated to support the narrative and, you know, probably cut out the boring bits. But how did you go in an environment like that where there was the potential for so many people to be watching you and being authentic in that space?
Whoa, that was really hard, definitely. And I actually nearly pulled out of the show because at that point in time, I was really struggling with acceptance of a big part of my life. I feel like up until a couple of years ago, I was only really able to talk about my life from when I was 18 and I'd moved out of home and really gained the control of my life. And anything before that, I didn't want to touch on. And going on to that show, I really worried that I may let out some of that trauma that I hadn't processed, and like people would see a part of me that was really raw. So I feel like as I've become older, as I've learned on my journey, I've been able to become more authentic at a deeper level at many points in our lives. There's only as far as we can meet ourselves, and going onto that show, that was a fear I had, that people would see things about me I wasn't ready to accept. But in the way of being myself, yeah, I felt like I just went on there as me. It was really, really scary. I didn't really consider so much any gameplay or anything. It was just an experience for me. And I think maybe it's something I should have thought about more, that maybe people wouldn't be authentic, but it's the experience you have. And I learned so much really from that.
I've had the thought probably just in the last few months, because I was definitely quite a naive apprentice coming into the trade sector. We often don't value being naive to something, but sometimes we need to be that little bit naive, so we do take the risk. And I wonder if we'd known better about some of the things that we'd walked into and taken like in our stride, being like, yeah, we'll be fine. And if we'd known better, maybe we wouldn't have, but then we would have also lost that learning opportunity.
This is the thing, we always want to know. We have this like real desire in us to just know what's going to happen because we feel like it's going to give us security. And the thing about that is, when you finally know, when you finally have that security, if your life could be laid out in front of you, then it really takes away the beauty of life. And that's what makes life so special, is that you don't know what you're going to learn, and you don't know what's going to come. And it's just this really beautiful, but also painful at times, continuation of learning about ourselves.
It does require a lot of trust in ourselves, and that can be scary, but really powerful when we do live our lives. And I guess that's where that knowing ourselves, knowing our purpose, it creates a lot of direction that makes it that tiny, tiny bit easier. Like, okay, I know that whatever happens, I'm going to survive. I'm going to figure this out. Like, I believe in myself.
When we are wanting to create change in our life, or when we want to change a belief that we may have about ourselves, we need to look at the evidence that's stacked up. And a lot of the times, maybe if you have a limiting self-belief, you can look at the evidence and go, okay, what's the evidence to this? What are the things that have led me to feeling this way? And when you actually look at that, and you're able to see it, you're able to recognize it, you're able to unpack it, you can then go, okay, what's the evidence I need to then step into a new belief? How much evidence do I need to stack up against these past beliefs? And I feel like it's such a powerful way to look at it. And something really great that I've come to find is, like, yes, we do hold weight to negative experiences, but time and time again, I have found when I find evidence that really sits with who I am authentically, it stacks up double, and you just are really able to trust it so much more. And it just slowly crushes that other pile down.
I want to talk about how you founded a platform, The Shift. So you're a massive advocate for mental health in the construction space. And I feel like that conversation around beliefs is just, I guess, a sneak peek into some of the learning that informs your focus and why it's so important. So why did you found The Shift and what is it about?
You're right. Limiting beliefs, we do a lot of work surrounding that at The Shift. And I've seen just doing that work, especially with teams on site, it's so powerful to see people actually voice their limiting beliefs with each other. When we do that, when we step into that vulnerable space, people actually begin recognizing themselves in other people and understanding that they're not alone in the human experience. But The Shift, I really created it. Honestly, I really have struggled with my mental health during my life, like since I was very, very young. And coming into the construction industry, I didn't know how to lead my life. I didn't know how to be authentic. All I knew how to do was to morph myself into my environment to fit in. And that led me down this road of drinking so heavily, like to the point I really consider at that point in my life, I was an alcoholic, like at the pub every afternoon, and so unhappy, really struggling with depression, anxiety. And I was in that space for so long that it actually led me to attempting to take my own life. I reached out to Headspace and they really helped me, but I went back to work. I, for years, never spoke about what had happened because I just held so much shame and nearly felt like I was really soft for not being able to handle an industry that everyone seemed to kind of be able to get on with. And as I slowly began working on myself, because it's been such a long process, and I'm going to be working on myself for the rest of my life. That's a reality for all of us, and that's okay. But as I really began working on myself, and I would open up and have these amazing, but also really confronting conversations with the people I worked with on site, I began to realize that this wasn't a me issue. This was an industry issue. And I just really wanted to help. But for so long, I wasn't in a space to help. And I didn't know what to do. I moved to Melbourne and I just started up The Shift. And I think the first session we just met in a park and did some connection and stuff. And over time, it's grown and I've been able to really connect with some teams on site, do events, and I don't know. It's been really special and I feel like there's so much more I want to do with it. And I'm coming to a place where I'm really seeing the impact and I'm seeing the impact that I want to have. But really at The Shift, what I focus on is giving tradies real tools for life, teaching them how to actually have a conversation with each other. It's really, really special to me.
Thank you for sharing and for everything you do in the industry, because I think the hardest part is how alone we often feel when we are in those places. And I know you often share that the statistics is every second day someone in construction takes out their life. And because it is a male populated industry, it is usually the men in our lives who aren't able to feel safe to speak up. And it's powerful that I guess you've taken your learning journey and you've been the one who's been brave. And I can imagine how special that is to be on that side and to facilitate that, I guess, letting the weight off of someone's shoulders just by showing them it's safe to have that conversation and to be sad inside or feel a little bit broken. And that's so normal.
It's so important that we build that safety net in community, on sites, in all of these spaces. And we just never know the impact that we have in the world and that, one person can have to another on site. And if we can begin just opening up those conversations, breath work is a really big tool that we use, teaching people what it actually looks like to regulate your nervous system and give people really fast and accessible tools that they can use if they feel like their anxiety is really high, or how can I calm myself down to actually check in and communicate what's going on with me. Because so often everyone knows someone who's really grumpy or difficult to be around, or they're maybe drinking a lot or whatever it may be. And you go, oh, hey, are you all right, mate? Like, yeah, what do you mean? Or you get to this point of maybe asking someone if they're okay. And there's a really big communication barrier there, because sometimes people carry things for so long that it's nearly become a part of them and they don't know how to communicate what's going on, because they're just like, this is how I am. And I think it's a really powerful thing when we begin going, okay, maybe this is how you are right now. Maybe this is how you've been for a while. Maybe this is how you watched your parents when you were growing up, and go, but that doesn't have to be your future. And there's just so much hope that I want to create, because I feel like when I have these conversations with people, I'm not having this conversation from like, I grew up and my life was dandy and I feel really sorry for you that you're struggling. I'm just like, man, I've been so down there and deep in it with the gutter, like in the gutter with you. And like, I have literally spent so many days going, I don't know how I'm going to get out of this. And I've come out of it and I've gone back. And I just want people to know when I speak with them, it's like, yeah, I understand. And I want people to see that there is that light out. And I want people to understand, like, a lot of people talk about me being a really happy and joyous person. And that really only comes from me really being able to move through the things that I thought would be impossible to move through, and seeing that there's life after pain.
For someone who's not able to join you at the shift, or they're proactively trying to learn these skills, or they are in a hard place, what would be your top 3 tips that they could practice tomorrow to help themselves?
Top 3 tips to practice tomorrow for absolutely anyone out there. First one, I would just say, if you can, reach out, and just to know, whoever you are, wherever you are, there's always someone, there's always a way to reach out. And as lonely as you feel, I promise you that you're not alone. The second thing I would say is, because a lot of the time when we get in this state, we are not leading our lives. We're not showing up for ourselves, and we don't actually have a lot of self-worth to do anything for ourselves. So I would just say, start small. What is one commitment that you can make to yourself for a week? Is it going to bed at a certain time? Is it drinking a certain amount of water? Is it staying off your phone for a point of time in the day? And can you show up for yourself in one small way and then begin building on that? So often when we want to change our lives, we want to do it all at once, and that can be really overwhelming, and we can make all these big changes and then we can't stick to it, so then we feel like a failure. So how can you show up for yourself in a way that is continuous throughout the week, every day? No negotiation. And the third one I would say is finding just a point in the day, like whether it's your drive to work, to just stop and just try and slow down your breathing down into your belly, slowing down the exhales, and just asking yourself the question, how am I really? What is really going on with me? Because in that time And in that moment, you are actually building up that understanding of what's happening inside of you. And often we're really scared to ask that question. We're scared of maybe what's going to come up, and we're scared of ourselves. But it's only through meeting ourselves in that pain and understanding what we're going through that we're able to then confront it head on and communicate that to the people that are going to help us.
This has been a pretty heavy chat, so I will put some links in the bio for anyone if something does come up, because it can be a really hard chat to have, but I really appreciate those tips. It's really about reaching out to anyone if you're feeling alone, taking some time to shop for yourself in the smallest commitment you can a day, and then taking some time to pause and just breathe and actually make time to check in with yourself, even if it's hard. For someone who is in that supervising leadership management role, what advice would you give to them about how they can support the well-being of their teams?
That's a really great question. And I think in construction, it needs to be something that we're talking about a lot more. And I think it's something that we try not to talk about because we're constantly trying to push jobs and get these outcomes. But the thing is, there's never an end to this grind. There's never an end to this pace and wanting to get all these outcomes happening. So I would say to anyone who's managing a team, really try and have that awareness that there's always going to be another job, but the team that stands there in front of you, you cannot replace a person. And if you can step into the day and actively engage with your team and ask them how they are, check in with them, and just take that time. I feel like so often we rush around, we just don't take that time. It can really make a difference. And when you actually put the time in with your team, I think you will really find that in return, they will put time in with you.
Because we are in such a time poor culture, just asking how are you and walking along because you're too busy isn't quite enough. You actually take the time to ask a couple more questions so that you know your team, so you can notice when things might be unusual, they might be a bit different. As a leader, you're able to help them if you do identify, maybe something is going on at home, but you never take the time to talk to them, you'll never know.
So often I find on site, it can just be something so small, but finding that moment when maybe you're packing up at the end of the day, or you're walking to your ute, you're just about to get smoko, and finding that space where you're kind of one-on-one with someone that maybe you've identified is struggling, and just going, mate, you all right? Is something kind of going on with you? I just noticed you're a bit different today. And making sure, I think it's really important that you find the space, maybe not like, giving someone the shoulder in front of everyone like, oh, what's wrong with you, mate? And making it a big deal, but just finding that space and just being that mate, like, you all good, mate? And it does a lot more than what we do realize.
I think that's where, regardless of what position we're in, whether you are the manager or the supervisor, actually showing up for other people and being that everyday leader is about saying, actually, I've noticed something. I'm a little bit worried about someone, and I have the power and the ability to be the person that walks up and says, hey, mate, are you okay?
100%. And at the end of the day, there's always going to be positions, there's always going to be roles, but our number one role is to be human. Every morning I finish at the gym, I drive home, and this man catches a bus at the time I drive home every day. And every morning we smile and we wave at each other. And it makes our day. We don't know each other's names. Nothing. That's our interaction. But it brings us both so much joy. And I think that's the attitude we need to have going into the world, and understanding that we're all in this together.
So if you were to give advice about how someone could show up as an everyday leader, regardless of where they are in their careers or what position they're in, what would be your advice to them?
I would just say, give yourself time. Give yourself time in becoming yourself. You take however many years to become the way you are today, and give yourself the time that the things that are hard may take, not 5 minutes, but a few years to unbecome, and that's okay. We're always learning about ourselves. So to anyone, I would say, give yourself the patience and understand that this is like a hard one, but understand that the really painful things that do happen in our lives and the struggles that happen, when we are able to accept them and not really walk with that shame, we are really able to become empowered, and you can turn pain into power. You can actually accept yourself as a whole and not feel like you have to push parts of yourself down or mold yourself to be in a room. And just to anyone, if each day you can work on becoming yourself a little bit more, saying no when you need to say no, and saying yes to the things you want to say yes to, I think you're well on your way.
That comment about turning your pain into your power is something that you do, and you show up for the construction community every day, online and like in person. And I really appreciate everything you've shared on the podcast. I've definitely taken a lot away from today, and I'm sure that's same for everyone who's listening to this. So thank you so much for your time, Bardie. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
If you'd like to connect with Bardie, you can check out the links in the bio. She's at bards.builds or at theshift.au on Instagram, or Bardie Somerville on TikTok and LinkedIn. If you are struggling or know someone who is struggling, I have included links in the bio as we covered some heavy topics in this episode. Please know that help is always available. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to Tradies Who Lead on your preferred podcast platform. Also, remember to like, share, or leave a review so we can continue to improve the podcast. You can also follow the podcast on socials at Tradies Who Lead for highlights, sneak peeks, and more. Thanks for joining me for this episode, and I'll see you at the next one.